Hey, this is Annex, and I'm going to record today a bit about how I work in Ableton and how I work with the push to using the session view in Ableton. And I'm doing this because I posted something, I think yesterday or the day before, and it actually got quite a bit of interest. And I think people are curious about, especially the combination with the push to and the session view, because I think it remains quite mysterious to some people. So I'm going to go through a set I did. This is actually the first live set that I made. And I'll show you how I set up each of the different tracks, each of the different songs within the live set. And then I'm going to go into one and I'll show you how I set it up. So how I trigger the clips, how the melodies and the harmonies work, and how the track progresses when I use the push to trigger things. So you can find this whole song on my SoundCloud if you're interested. It's the first French Core Live Setette, deep at the bottom there. So once I finished, so I have all this, so this is session view to take a step back, and this is arrangement view. And first I set all these clips up in session view. So just open this one for a second. Everything here, so these vertical columns are called tracks, and these little bits in them are called clips. And tracks can either be audio or MIDI. When you have a drum rack, it'll be MIDI, but when you have audio, it's like a sample that you import. I can't find one right now. I'll go back to that in a second. Anyway, so the vertical columns, the columns are tracks. These are clips, the little squares, and the rows here are sessions. So if you look over here at the master, this would be session 1, session 2, session 3, and you trigger the sessions by pressing this arrow here, the same as you could trigger an individual clip by pressing the trigger on the clip. But I'll go back to that in a second. So here I have 6 songs that together comprise the live set that I did. And they're in different keys because it's boring to have one set in all the same keys. So the first one is in A minor, the second one is in D sharp minor, the third one is in E minor, the fourth is F sharp minor, and the last two are in C minor. I prefer to do everything in minor just because I don't like happy, positive things, and that would be more like what you can do with major. It's not necessarily exclusive to happiness, but yeah, I just like doing minor better for the feel that you can create. So this is how the session view looks with all of them collapsed like this, and every one of these is in a group. So this first song is in a group of, how many tracks are this? So starting from track 1 here, which is the group, and then going to all the way to track 14 here. So this means that the first song in my live set has 13 tracks in it, and they're all collapsed into this one group. And under this, I also have a subgroup sometimes, which means you can make multiple copies under one track and group them together for layering instruments, but I'll go over that in a little bit. So we have our 6 songs together that make up our live set. And when I recorded them, so I went over and I'm gonna go to my push here and go to session, and I think you can see that. Okay, so now you see that everything is collapsed here still, so it just mirrors what you see on the screen, what you see in the session view of Ableton. So when I go through and play it, I trigger each of these sessions. So what you see here with the repeat intervals, basically, this column here, just to the right of the buttons, this mirrors what you see on the master trigger down here. So say if I push this first one of 1 and 1 30-second triplet, then that will trigger the first row here. That triggers the first master session. So I went through basically from top to bottom with some exceptions to record this. And what you're probably most familiar with, it records to this arrangement view. So I'll show you this first because it's, I think, easiest for most people to understand, because this is what you're used to seeing if you're used to working with a DAW. So the arrangement view, it's tracks according to time. So it goes from 0 minutes, 0 seconds all the way to just over, I think 14 or 15 minutes for this live set. And just as we saw in the session view, so remember we had the songs according to the columns here, it's just transposed. So now the songs go according to rows. So we have song 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And these are all the same groups as you see here, they're just flipped over. So they if you did linear algebra, it crosses the diagonal. So you flip everything that's a row to column and a column to the row. So it's the same thing, just kind of rotated, if that makes sense, and inverted if that's necessary. So if I open these up, I can select them all by going to Control A, and I press this little 3-bar thing to open them, and then you see everything that it recorded. So you see again under this first song you have these 13 tracks that we just counted, so they're all still in the same order. If I change the order anywhere in here on arrangement view, it also changes in the session view, and the same goes for if I collapse something, then it similarly collapses in the session view. So that makes it a little more straightforward to go back and forth, because then once you do one thing, it's mirrored on the other side. So you don't have to remember what you did again in that sense. Okay, so this was the first song. Again, we have the 13 tracks. And the same thing you see again for the next song. So once I stop triggering sessions in the first group here, so this is about bar 241. So this is at 4 minutes and 45-ish seconds. So then the first group is done, the first song is done, and we start going into the second group here. And if we want to see that in more detail, we can expand it. And this is the view that you're probably used to seeing if you use Logic or Fruity Loops or anything like that. And again, once the second group is done, it goes into the third group and just starts, it keeps recording over time. So this should be pretty logical to you. This is the same way as if you listen to a song and this is the way that you hear the sounds coming out of the song. So basically left to right, like we're used to reading. It's the same thing. So again, the same thing for the fourth song here, and the fifth song, and the sixth song. So you see it goes like a staircase going from top to bottom and left to right as the live set progresses. So I didn't want to focus too much on arrangement view, but now you see at least how it looks. So you can take that and go into session view next. The group of tracks that I want to talk about, I think it's this one today. So this is one of the first live sets I did, and it's a lot more simple than I'm arranging it now, but I think it's easier to get an introduction to. So I want to do the third track, the third song here. I'll let you hear a little bit of it, and then I'll go and I'll let you see how it looks when it's playing, and then I'll go back into session view and talk about that a bit more. And I don't have any light decking on here, so maybe you can't hear me when I talk through. So these hi-hats here, this is the percussion, the top level percussion. And these are on a drum rack, which I'll show you in a second. This horn is also a MIDI instrument. And you see the MIDI notes here, and that's the same as the bass notes. Whatever this vowel is, I think it's the top sound. It's also as a MIDI instrument, and then I have some samples. So the somatic samples are audio, and you can tell the difference because you see the audio waveform here instead of the MIDI notes, basically. And this weapon here should have been a sound clip, an audio clip that I put into the sampler, but I guess the sample has been lost, so I'll cover that in another tutorial, how I work with some samples using Synchrony. It's quite fun. And then the kick comes in, and the kick is also in MIDI. I used a VST to make this one called Hardcore Beats. This is what it looks like. So it's similar to, yeah, same ideas if you make a kick from scratch, it just does a bit of the work for you. But that's not where I was going. So. And then here I have a bit of a transition, so at the end of each of these songs, I have a bit that helps to ease the move to the next song. So here actually, every time usually I have overlap between the two songs, and this is like if you were DJing, it would be how you mix in one song with the next song. So here you're gonna get, the way I set it up, you get different scales. So you have a bit of, disharmony, I forget the word, what it is, discordance, I guess, where you're a bit confused, you're kind of not sure, you can't grasp onto a melody yet, and that sets you up for entering a new song and being excited when you can catch on to the groove of the next one. So here you see a bit of overlap here, and in this case I overlap the bass. So here I overlap the bass of my fourth song, which is just a MIDI here, with one of the operator synthesizers of Ableton Max 10. So this is the new instrument I introduced. And then I have some of these clips to add some interest. And this top level to kind of join it together a bit. This is a MIDI again. This is this is something in Omnisphere. I really like Omnisphere for the textures and the elements that you can get with it. Just taking a second to open. Yeah, this is, apparently it's a human voice called The Last Battle, but I'm not sure about that. Anyway, it has like nice textural elements that go into the higher frequencies that create a nice depth. So also what I'm overlapping just at the end here is this instrument, and this is like a raindrop or something. So I have nothing that's transitioning between the two songs that's really going to clash. It just creates a little something different that's off-putting until you can understand where the next song is going. So that would start here, where we have more layers that come in and the percussion that comes into the new song. Okay, so going back to the song we're going to focus on. So this song was the third one here. It's in E minor. And that also means that my kick is going to be in E minor. If you see in the, it is not E minor because sometimes this VST doesn't pitch properly, so you have to correct for it by putting in the note in the MIDI keyboard that would actually make it sound right, if that makes sense. So, but that's not what I'm talking about. We're focusing on this song, and then we're going to go back here. So I'm going to zoom out a little so you remember how it looks. So you get the overview just of 3 here. So we have these different layers, and we have them going from left to right as they keep adding to each other over time. So how does that look in session view? So we opened it up here and we're focusing on this group, and it does it for us. And we have the tracks here, just instead of being horizontal, they're vertical. So when this first started here, so when we first started hearing the bass, we have the hi-hats, we have this textural interest. We're gonna hear the same thing when we start triggering at the beginning. And we go to the push. I want to go to session view. Oh yeah, you can kind of see that. So this E minor is open here. I go over 3 and then I want to go down. So this is changing what I see on the push here. And it mirrors what the screen is showing me. So you see this red box here around the clips and over the tracks. This is what I'm actually seeing on the push. I hope you can see the colors okay. It's kind of bright outside today. So I want to have, oops. So that goes up and down by, I think 8 or something, but I want to go up by 1 now. So I use these arrows at the top and not the, oh, they go up and down by 12 and not the octaves at the bottom. And you can also use these arrows for triggering sessions if you just want to go down, but I don't use them that way, but it's possible. Okay, I'm gonna hide my return tracks and not talk about them today. Okay, so here we see this first clip. This is under the battle column, and that was that textural element that I showed you. I also have a low frequency operator on it to kind of make it pump, just so the sound has a little more movement to it. So when I go to trigger this first clip here, I'm going to go all the way to the right to this first button. So the 1/32 triplets. This corresponds here to the first box on the top right that we see, because remember, this is represented within the red square that you see in the session view. So I'm going to click this top button, and that's triggering row 19, which it corresponds to. And you see that it's playing because it's flashing here, it's flashing on the push, and you also see the green button in session view on your computer screen. And when you start to play something on the push, so it'll flash green, and then it just keeps flashing its own color once it's still playing. So next, of course, we want to go to the next row, and then we go 1 down from that. So we're triggering here row 20 with a second from the top trigger here. And then here I triggered the bass, which is the first column here, it's the green. I've triggered the hi-hat, so the top loops that are the next column. We have this textural elements again, so I like to carry these through for multiple sessions, so it kind of ties it together again. And then we have some of the samples, so we have the gun here, which is the blue column, and the green column, which is a knife sound. And these are also fun to experiment. So with these sort of sound effects and things, the push provides you a little more flexibility to play around with it, because you can literally just add them in anywhere you want, and you can't really go that wrong. And it's nice to do that because then you figure out what sounds good for where you put the sound effects. And it's not recording anything like it would have been in arrangement view, so you're not like stuck with the ideas that you have coming out. Then again, so we have this third row going, so I want to do the one after that, and I just keep going down, pressing next session after next session, and it goes from top to bottom. And what I want to do is I want to keep developing the sounds here. So we start with something very simple. We started with that texture, and then we added bass, and then we added this Omnisphere instruments, then we added back the texture, and we're at well. We should have been adding the vocal samples that I had, but we're not. But I was at one point. And then eventually we work our way down to the kicks. And then anytime I have the kicks, I get rid of the bass, because the kick in French chord is the talk, so it's the attack of the kick. as well as the bass combined together. So it does both of those functions, and that's why the kick is so heavy, because it's both the kick and the bass combined. So anytime I have the kick, the bass is off. So sometimes I even put these on the same track so I don't accidentally trigger one and the other one at the same time, and then I can more easily keep track of where I am in the song, because then I can think, okay, do I have bass or do I have kick, or do I have neither of those? And it'll correspond to the build up, the kick, or the chorus, more or less. So another interesting thing you can do, say you started with the texture element, so you can combine, and this is one of the benefits of session view. So again, I'm pressing here on the left, it's the stop, and so it's the play button, it stops and starts, but that's the only thing I'm doing on the left side. That's the only thing you can't see, otherwise it wouldn't fit. So if I start with this sound, and then we want to add the hi-hats on instead of having all of this row trigger. We just want to see, okay, what does it sound like if just the percussion is on? So then I just press the corresponding clip. And here the corresponding clip, as you can see, is the top one on the hi-hat track. So I'm going to press the second clip down on my push, because it looks exactly like here on the screen. And then I could think, okay, how does it sound with this Omnisphere instrument added in? So I usually, depends on what it is, but I usually wait until the end of the 2 or 4 bars, sometimes 8 bars, depending on what I'm playing, to trigger this 5, 6, 7, 8, and then I trigger this instruments. And you have to also figure out the latency. So there's no situation where you can have a hardware setup with your computer and have 0 latency. So you're always going to have some, just because it's physically impossible to have 0 latency with that kind of energy transfer, I guess you could say. But you want to figure out what the minimum latency you can get is, while still having a good sound, and then figure out how that corresponds to how fast you have to trigger and when you have to trigger. So for example, now I have my output buffer size at 1024 samples, and the latency is quite low, also because the air compensation is low. But if I reduced it even more, you'd hear static and you'd see the CPU go up here. So it's always trying to find a balance between what you can use in practice and what gives you good results. So again, if I wanted to add another layer, say I wanted to add the bass, I would start counting, and I can start counting with these hi-hats because it's quarter notes. You see that in the MIDI. It goes to 1.2 bars, and that means it's every quarter note that it counts. You could also use the metronome, but the metronome is not as fun, and it doesn't really have the same sound as you want in your song necessarily. So right now I'm just using this hi-hat. So you would count, say I want to start it on the next 8 beats, so I would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that one's a little off because I did change the latency since I played this one last. What you want to check for also is this is going to be the difference between, so how long Ableton intentionally waits, so not the latency, but how long it takes to trigger the next clip once it receives the trigger that you sent to it. So I usually do, I think, a quarter because my computer is fast enough now, but when my computer was a bit slower, there was a little more going on in its brain, so it had to go, I think I had to do like a half bar or even 1 bar, because it compensates a bit for the differences in timing that you have between when you press it and when it will trigger. But it is harder. It would be like if you play the piano and you don't hear the notes right away. It's really hard to put together in your minds what you hear and what you're playing and what it sounds like if you have too much latency. So anyway, I usually set it to a quarter, so meaning I would want to trigger the next thing, the next clip or the next session when it's 3/4 of the way to the next bar, if that makes sense. It would be actually a little bit before that, because I want to accommodate for the latency. So in this case, it would be 3/4 of the way to the next bar. So you have counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you have the next bar starting. I would count with this quarter beats. I would want to start on 1, 2, 3 on the third count, because then we're 3/4 of the way through to the next bar. But I actually want to start a little bit before that. So this overall latency is 83.2 milliseconds. So then just bump it up a little bit in time. So you press it a little faster than a little before. You have those, you hit that 3/4 mark before the next bar, but still after the 1/2 mark or the 2/4 mark. So you just have to figure it out and play around with it and see what your computer is capable of and what you're capable of too. Yeah, so then that's actually all I wanted to talk about in terms of the session view for this. Once I say we go to the kick, so this is kind of like the apex of the song. You can also have, say, when your kick is playing, you can trigger things over it, like I mentioned before. So you don't have to have everything on this line, on the same line as your kick. You can have, say, a session below, so you can insert a scene. And I always forget if it inserts above or below, but it inserts below, but I'll just pull that empty scene back up. If you use Excel, the Microsoft program, it's kind of similar to this, the way the rows work. So you can copy, duplicate, paste, anything you can do with the columns, with the tracks, you can do with the sessions, with the rows. So here I just I injected a new row, so a new session, and I want to add, say, imagine this was a new sound effect, but I add it down here, so I trigger the kick, and I have the layers over the kick, and then when the kick is playing, I also want to trigger this next one. And that helps me remember, so I know that this kick is up here too, or this knife is up here too, and I could go back just to play up here, but it's hard to remember, especially when you're going through 6 songs that are, what was it, almost 20 minutes long in total. So it helps if you just add more rows and then figure out a system and a process for how you will code those rows and how you understand your own codes. So I could actually do another tutorial if anyone is interested about the workflow I use now with that. And you can also do cool things with sessions like change the BPM. So when you trigger it, it triggers a BPM change. And you can change the colors and the names in all the same way that you can change the tracks. So in some ways there's a little too much creative potential, but once you know how to work it and understand how to work it, then it really does help the workflow. So again, if you want to hear this song, it's on my SoundCloud. But the better stuff is the newer stuff. This is just the most simple explanation. So I hope you were somewhat helped by this. When I started using the push, I found there wasn't really a lot of tutorials that answered the questions that I wanted. So I hope this is helpful for you, but if you have any more questions, I could do another video about it. And hopefully, you can learn a little bit more that way.